PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. Some games in Fischer Random Chess evolve into a position that looks like it could come from traditional chess. But there are other games which are kind of chaotic and bonkers and irrational right from the very beginning, and they never really settle down, and it looks like chess from another planet. And this is one of those games. So this is Jakhovir Sindarov, who had a very good tournament in the Weissenhaus Freestyle tournament, and Magnus Carlsen playing black. So this is from their playoff match for third and fourth place. So Sindarov playing white. e4. Well, that looks pretty good, supported by the rook and claiming space in the centre. e5 and knight f3 and knight f6. So this looks quite traditional. You know, if white could play bishop c4 and castle kingside, well, actually it looks kind of like a gioco piano. But there's a problem with bishop c4. And this looks like a beautiful diagonal for the bishop, as usual. But here there's a tactic. Knight takes pawn, rook takes, b5 hits the bishop, hits the rook, and already black has a very nice initiative here. So that's going to win back material, and black's pieces look tremendous. So Sindarov played a4. Okay, so that looks a little bit odd to me because it's not supported by a rook. However, perhaps he wants to discourage b5, and maybe he's preparing to play bishop c4. And again, we've got a kind of gioco piano position. Carlsen played c6. Now, I understand he wants to bring the queen into the game, and I mean, I've heard from many of the top players have said that in Fischer Random Chess, bringing the queen into the game quickly is often a priority. But I wonder how that bishop is feeling right now, blocked in by these two pawns. That's the only drawback of this move. But I think the idea is that after bishop c4, then d5, hits the bishop. So b4. Okay, so gaining space and perhaps wants to bring the queen into the game. So very interesting stuff. Queen c7, I mean, that looks a little bit unusual, but I think, well, perhaps he might be looking to open the c5 with c5 at some point. But yeah, pretty unusual move, I have to say. Knight g6. Excuse me, queen c7, queen b3. Yeah, I mean, that looks very sound looking down here. At this stage, I prefer white, definitely. Knight g6, okay, bringing this knight into the game. But, I mean, that looks really weird to me. Carlsen is offering a pawn. So it's a gambit pawn. I mean, maybe he's just hoping that white will waste a lot of time grabbing that pawn, and then, maybe black can castle, put the rook on d8 and maybe open up the position. Maybe he wants to just play c5 and open things up. And it is a very tricky position. The computer thinks that white is better, but it's not easy. But instead, Sindarov wasn't tempted by the pawn. Played rook b1, which supports the pawn on b4. Now, the only thing is, that means the king can't castle queenside. It's either going to stay in the middle or it's going to have to go kingside. d5 from Carlsen. Yeah, claiming space in the middle. Knight g3 and castles queenside. There we go. So he did want to put the king here, and that rook is opposite white's king. So now the king on d1 with this rook opposite really needs to think about its position. So that's why Sindarov played bishop d3. He's clearly preparing to castle kingside and supporting this pawn. But it's a very strange position, you know, with this bishop on a8 in particular. Carlsen took on e4 and played knight f4. Well, that feels very logical to attack this pawn and also the bishop on d3. And, you know, in many ways, Sindarov's continuation was also very logical. You know, to my eyes, of course, white doesn't want to allow knight takes bishop, which would damage the pawns, and black wins, in inverted commas, a knight for a bishop. So he now played knight f6 and bishop f5 check. So that saves the bishop and, you know, doubles the pawns. Looks very reasonable. In fact, the computer looks at this with a very unprejudiced eye and thinks that knight g3 is the best move. Now that's very interesting. So why? Well, 3 pieces attack the pawn on e5 for starters. And if knight takes bishop, which looks really ugly for white, in fact, the machine thinks that white is better. And the reason is that white can castle very easily, so the king will be safe on g1. And that really transforms the position. Safe king, there'll be pressure on e5. But look at that bishop on a8. Not great. So white would be better. But as I said, Sindarov goes for this, which kind of looks reasonable. But let's see what happens. g3. And now he castles. Again, you know, it's hard to criticize what he's done here. Knight takes pawn from Carlsen. So parts of this position look kind of normal. You could say this king position, you know, these pieces. But the rest of it looks pretty weird over here. I think Sindarov's, even taking this pawn is, you know, could be quite brave because it opens up the b5 for the queen and rook. But Carlsen's judgment was pretty good. Let's see what happened. d4 from Sindarov. Well, this is really sharp. So you can see in this position, that bishop is shut in by that pawn on e5. It's doing nothing on a1, even though that diagonal is open. d4, however, well, that looks to bring this bishop into the game. So a really interesting position. Okay, so here is where I'd like you to have a think, and I'm going to have a drink. How do you play with black in this position? Black to play, Carlsen playing black. What did he do next? And this is really a critical moment in the game where it feels like white is about to take the initiative. But Carlsen came up with something very special. Okay, cheers. Black to play. Well, if black exchanges on d4, that brings the bishop into the game. Looks in 2 different directions. Pawn on f6 threatened. And very decent compensation for the pawn. Carlsen came up with a brilliant idea. c5. So if pawn takes c5, bishop c5, whoa, lots of paint on the board there. Brings this bishop into the game looking at f2. It prepares b6, bringing that bishop into the game. So they'll look pretty good. That bishop is locked in. That pawn is well protected. Black is doing well. So that's why Sindarov took on e5. He needs to bring that bishop into the game. But then b6. So within the space of 2 moves, the position has been transformed because that bishop on a8, which was looking like it would never see the light of day, a window has been opened, and wow, what a diagonal that is for the bishop. Transforms the position. So black's king is very safe behind those pawns. So the queen and rook aren't really doing much. So rook fd1. Queen c6, threatening the knight. Of course, that can't move. There'll be mate down here. E takes f6, so still trying to bring that bishop in the corner into the game. And here's another, well, critical moment where black has to be very aware of the tactics. So what about queen takes knight? Well, this fails to bishop e5 check. There we go. That would justify Sindarov's strategy to bring that bishop into the game. Of course, if the king steps up, then queen takes queen. And if rook takes, rook check, and queen takes f7, and that leads to a crushing attack for white. But Carlsen's next move was so cool. He simply played bishop b7, making room for the king. So if there's a check, then the king can just step into the corner. And now queen takes is threatened. Bishop g4 had to be defended. But now Carlsen's initiative takes over. c4. I mean, it's still a pretty odd position, but it's looking a little bit more like a normal position. Okay, threatening rook takes knight. a5. So the knight is completely secure. Sindarov exchanges rooks, and he wants to bring his queen into the game. Queen f5, trying to sort of shore up his defenses, giving this knight more protection. But look at black's pieces. All black's pieces are playing here. And, I mean, beautifully centralized, but at the same time directed towards the king. And you can see that these pieces, well, basically white is just hanging on here. They're split, so coordinating really poorly and just defending. So this is a winning position for Carlsen. Bishop c3, trying to bring that bishop into the game. Knight c2, great move. So if queen takes, then rook d3, simple piece sack, and then he's preparing to take on f3. And basically the queen and the bishops will kill the king. If queen e2, then rook takes bishop. Really neat sacrifice from Carlsen. Rook c1 played. And again, he's got it under control. Knight e3. Beautiful finale. Pawn takes, bishop takes, check, double attack. Bishop takes rook. Now Carlsen is the exchange ahead, and of course this is completely winning now. And yeah, he didn't mess around here, he just played queen d5. So just wants to exchange pieces, and then, well, there's more dropping. So Sindarov resigned. Yeah, completely lost position. So interesting how the game can turn on one move. We've seen this before. This is a key position, d4, where it looks like white is more active. Certainly after an exchange here, white is doing pretty well. But this was a brilliant decision, which just turns the position completely and starts the process of bringing that bishop into the game. And then it was very unpleasant for Sindarov. Great game from Carlsen, but he gambled, coming back here. Knight g6, wow, what a decision. Queen takes f7, what would have happened? What had Carlsen intended? Who knows? Anyway, great stuff. Hope you enjoyed that. There's going to be more coming up on the channel very soon, including a Patreon-only broadcast series. So listen out for that. If you want to sign up to patreon.com/PowerPlayChess, please do, and check out the rewards. So I'm going to be having broadcasts especially for patrons coming up very soon. Thanks for watching.